The one who had laughed with him in the mess hall over terrible noodles. The one who had fixed his broken comm unit when he thought it was useless. The one who had stood beside him in silence, watching the stars, just so neither of them had to feel alone. And in her golden eyes now, he saw fear. Fear of hurting him. Fear of losing control. Fear of being left to burn alone. He couldn't walk away from that. Not when she trusted him enough to show it. Slowly, James reached out his hand. Not touching her, just offering it. Her breath caught. She stared at his hand, trembling as if it were both salvation and doom. "You're sure?" she whispered, her voice breaking. James nodded once. "I'm sure." For a long moment, Karenna didn't move. Then with shaking fingers, she reached out and took his hand. Her touch was hot. Too hot for comfort, but he didn't let go. And when their hands met, the distance between them vanished. In that small, silent storage bay, as the storm raged outside, James made his choice. It wasn't about fear anymore. It wasn't about survival. It was about trust, about compassion, about stepping into the fire because someone he cared about needed him there. And though he didn't know what tomorrow would bring, James knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't let Karenna face this storm alone. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm inside the storage bay. James had expected heat when he touched Karenna's hand, but not this kind of heat. It wasn't like touching fire. It was like touching something alive, something burning and trembling all at once. Her fingers gripped his tightly, almost too tightly, like she was afraid to let go. Her golden eyes locked onto his, wide, glowing brighter than ever. "James," she whispered, her voice shaking. "If I lose control?" "You won't," he said softly. His throat was dry, his heart pounding, but he didn't pull away. "Not with me." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The only sounds were the hum of the outpost and the storm outside beating against the walls. Then Karenna leaned, closer, her breath ragged, her body trembling as if holding herself back took more strength than she had left. James didn't run. He didn't move away. He just stayed there, close enough for her to see he wasn't afraid. That was all it took. Karenna let out a low sound, half pain, half relief, as she closed the distance. Her forehead rested against his shoulder, her whole body shaking. He felt the heat pouring off her, waves of fire rolling through her skin. "I can't," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't fight anymore." James placed his hand gently on her back. "Then don't. You don't have to fight me." The words seemed to shatter the last barrier she had built. Karenna clutched him, burying, her face against him, her breath hot against his neck. It wasn't gentle, it was desperate. Every touch, every tremor in her body, told him she had been holding this storm inside for too long. And yet, even in her desperation, she was careful. She didn't crush him, though she was stronger. She didn't harm him, though her claws could have. She trembled, but she restrained herself, giving him space to guide her. James felt fear. Yes. His heart raced, his body tense. But beneath the fear was something else, something stronger, compassion. This wasn't about danger anymore. This was about Karenna, his friend, his roommate, the one who had trusted him enough to show her weakness. And now she was trusting him to hold her together when she couldn't. So he did. He held her through the fire, whispering quiet words, steadying her trembling body with his presence. Every moment felt endless, stretched thin between fear and tenderness. Time blurred. James didn't know if hours passed or minutes. The storage bay felt like another world, cut off from the storm outside. It was just him and Karenna, bound together by need and trust, riding out the fire that threatened to consume her. And slowly, so slowly, he felt the change. Her trembling began to ease. Her grip loosened, not because she wanted to let go, but because the storm inside her was softening. The fire was still there, but it no longer burned her alive. It warmed her instead, spreading calm where there had only been pain. Karenna pulled back slightly, her golden eyes shimmering with tears. "You stayed," she whispered, her voice soft, almost childlike. James gave a weak smile, brushing his thumb against her trembling hand. "Of course I stayed." For the first time since the storm began, Karenna's face softened. Not with hunger, not with pain, but with something far gentler, something human. She rested her forehead against his again, closing her eyes. "You don't know what you've done for me." James's chest tightened. "Then tell me." She opened her eyes, and in them he didn't just see fire. He saw gratitude. He saw connection. He saw something that went beyond survival. "You didn't just save my life," she whispered. "You saved me." The outpost was still locked. The storm, still raging, but inside that small room a different storm had passed. What had begun as fear and desperation had become something else. Something fragile, powerful, and unshakable. James didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know if Earth would ever understand, or if anyone would accept what had happened here. But he knew one truth, clear and unshakable. In the fire of Karenna's need, he had found something more than survival. He had found connection, and that connection would never burn out. When James opened his eyes, the storm was gone. For the first time in days, the outpost was quiet. No alarms, no rattling walls, no flashing red lights. Just silence. Calm, peaceful silence. At first, he thought he was dreaming, but when he shifted, he felt warmth against him. Real, solid, alive. Karenna. She was sitting beside him, leaning lightly against his shoulder, her silver skin dim now, no longer burning with fire. Her golden eyes were closed, her face soft, in a way James had never seen before. For once there was no strain, no fear, no trembling, just peace. James stayed still, not wanting to disturb her. He watched her breathe slowly, evenly, as if her body had finally found rest. When she stirred, it was gentle. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment she looked confused. Then her gaze found him, and a small, almost shy smile touched her lips. "You're still here," she whispered. James chuckled softly, though his throat felt tight. "Where else would I go?" Her smile grew, though her eyes glistened. She sat up straighter, folding her hands in her lap. "The storm has passed. You can leave the bay now. You are free." "Free?" James tilted his head. "Karenna, I never felt trapped." She blinked, surprised, and looked away quickly. He could see the conflict in her, gratitude mixed with fear, strength mixed with shame. She was an alien soldier trained to be strong, yet here she was, showing him the most fragile parts of herself. And she didn't know what to do with it. "I was afraid," she said after a long pause, her voice low. "Afraid of hurting you, afraid of what you would think of me. My cycle. It is not something humans could ever understand." James leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You're right. I don't understand everything. But I do know this. You didn't hurt me. You trusted me, and I stayed because I trust you." Her golden eyes lifted to his, and this time, she didn't look away. Trust. The words seemed to hang in the air between them, stronger than any storm. Later, they walked together to the observation deck. The outpost was quiet now, the metal walls humming softly as systems came back online. Outside the glass, the stars stretched endlessly, bright and steady, like nothing had happened. Karenna stood beside him, her hands folded behind her back. "It feels strange," she admitted. "The storm was so loud, so heavy, and now—" Silence. James smiled faintly. "Silence isn't always bad." She glanced at him, her lips curving. "Not when you are here." The words were simple, but James felt them hit deeper than anything else she had said. He turned to face her, his chest tightening. "So, what now?" Karenna tilted her head, thoughtful. Now, we continue. We live. But things are different, James. I am bound to you now, and you to me. Her voice was soft but steady. Not a warning, not a threat, a truth. James let the words settle in his chest. Bound. The thought should have scared him. It should have made him feel trapped. But instead, it felt right. He thought of Earth, of the life he had left behind, of the empty streets and crowded faces that never remembered his name. He thought of how lonely he had been before this outpost, before Karenna, and then he thought of her, standing here now, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the starlight, her silver skin soft against the dark. Maybe fate had brought him here. Maybe the storm had forced them together. But in his heart, James knew it was more than chance. Karenna stepped closer, so close their shoulders brushed. James, she said quietly, you saved me. Not just from death, from myself. I will never forget this. James smiled, his voice steady. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. Her lips curved into a small, real smile, the kind he had only seen once or twice before. And as they stood together in the quiet outpost, watching the stars beyond the glass, James realized something simple and unshakable. He hadn't just survived the storm. He had found a place. He had found someone. And in a universe that often felt cold and endless, that was everything. James studied her. She looked like someone fighting an invisible war inside herself, every muscle tight, every breath trembling. It wasn't just pain. It was restraint. The day dragged on. James tried to give her space, like she asked. He stayed, in his bunk most of the time, tinkering with a broken datapad just to keep his hands busy. He told himself he was being smart, being safe. But every few minutes he thought about her. He thought about the way she looked at him this morning, the fire in her eyes she didn't want him to see. He thought about her words, dangerous for you, and yet, she hadn't locked herself away. She hadn't hidden from him completely. That confused him more than anything. Late in the evening, James wandered the halls. The air inside the station felt heavy, almost thick. He found Karenna near the observation deck, standing in front of the glass as the storm flashed outside. She didn't notice him at first. Her hand was pressed against the glass, her silver skin glowing brighter under the red emergency lights. Her shoulders trembled like she was barely holding herself upright. Karenna, James said softly. She turned quickly, too quickly. Her golden eyes caught his, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. James felt something twist in his chest. Fear, yes, but also something else he couldn't name. I told you to stay away, she whispered, her voice strained. I'm not going to hide in a corner while you... He stopped himself, searching for words. While you suffer. Her lips trembled. She shook her head. You don't understand. It is not just suffering. It is need. It is survival. And when I look at you... Her voice broke. She pressed her hand against her chest, closing her eyes. When I look at you, it is harder to fight. James's breath caught. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and heavy. He didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to run back to his bunk and lock the door. But another part, the stronger part, refused to leave her like this. He stepped closer, slow and careful, like approaching a wounded animal. Then I'll keep my distance, he said softly. But I won't abandon you. Her golden eyes opened again, filled with pain and something he almost thought was gratitude. Almost. She nodded once, her voice barely a whisper. Then, stay where I cannot touch you. James forced a small smile. I'll manage. But as he walked back to his bunk, his chest heavy, one truth pressed into his mind and refused to leave. He wasn't sure how long Karenna could hold on, and he wasn't sure how long he could either. The third day came with no mercy. The storm, outside, still raged, battering the outpost with invisible waves of fire. Inside, James felt the weight of silence pressing on him harder than the storm itself. He hadn't seen Karenna much since the night before. She had locked herself in one of the storage rooms for hours, and he could only hear faint movements behind the door. Sometimes, it sounded like she was pacing. Other times, he thought he heard her crying. But James didn't knock. He didn't want to make things worse. Still, his worry grew heavier with each passing hour. By evening, the outpost felt like a prison. The walls were cold, the air was stale, and James's nerves were stretched thin. He sat in the mess hall with a half-finished meal, trying to convince himself to eat when the door slid open. Karenna stood there. She looked different. Not just tired, not just strained, changed. Her silver skin shimmered brighter than ever, almost glowing. Her golden eyes burned like liquid fire, sharp and desperate. And her breathing, ragged, uneven, like she had been running, though she hadn't moved far. James rose to his feet instantly. "Karenna!" She cut him off, with a shaking voice. "Don't say my name, please." He froze. Her tone wasn't angry. It was breaking. Karenna stepped further inside, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table like she needed to hold herself up. She wouldn't meet his eyes. "I cannot keep this inside any longer," she whispered. "You need to know the truth." James's heart pounded. "Tell me." She looked at him then, and he almost wished she hadn't. Her golden eyes shone with a fierce raw light, and for the first time, James saw fear in her. Real fear. "It's not just desire," she said, her voice trembling. "It's survival. My body burns, James. Every hour I fight it, it eats me alive. My kind, if we resist the cycle for too long, it destroys us. I will die." The words hit him like a punch. James's chest tightened, his throat dry. He had thought she was just struggling, just uncomfortable. But this was life or death. Karenna leaned forward, gripping the table harder, her nails scraping against the metal. "I thought I could endure it. I thought I could hide it from you. But I can't anymore. Every time I see you, every time I smell you, it becomes worse." Her voice cracked, and she looked away, ashamed. James swallowed hard, his mind racing. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay. But he had no words. How could anything about this be okay? For a long moment, silence filled the mess, all. Only the storm outside spoke, rattling the walls and echoing like distant thunder. Finally, James forced his voice out. "What do you need me to do?" Her gaze snapped back to him, sharp and desperate. "Run," she whispered. "Run, lock yourself away, and do not come out until the storm passes." James blinked. "You want me to leave you like this?" Her hands shook harder, her body trembling like it might collapse. "If you stay near me, I will not be able to control myself. And if that happens, you will be the one who pays the price." Her voice broke on the last words, filled with pain that cut through him deeper than any threat. James stared at her. He remembered all the times she had laughed with him in the mess hall, the quiet conversations they had shared in the observation deck, the trust they had built in this lonely outpost. She wasn't a monster. She was his friend, and now she was begging him to run away. But he couldn't. Something in his chest refused to move. "I'm not going to abandon you," James said finally, his voice steady though his heart pounded. Karenna flinched, like the words hurt her more than the fire burning inside her. Her eyes glistened, and for a second James thought she might break down completely. But instead she clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay upright. "You don't understand what you're choosing," she whispered. "Then explain it to me," he said. "Show me. Trust me." Her lips trembled. Her golden eyes locked onto his, burning brighter than ever, filled with fear, hunger, and something else he couldn't quite name. And in that fragile silence, James realized the truth. The breaking point wasn't just hers. It was his too. The storm outside roared louder, but the real storm, the dangerous, fragile, unstoppable storm, was standing right in front of him, and there was no turning back. James couldn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bunk, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. His mind replayed Karena's words again and again. If I resist too long, I will die. He wanted to believe there was another way. Some medicine, some trick in the outpost's database, something in the emergency kits. But he already knew the truth. If there had been an answer, Karena would have found it. She was smarter, more disciplined, more prepared than he ever was, and now she was breaking. The storm outside had trapped them both. No rescue ship, no chance of help. Just silence, red warning lights, and two souls trying not to fall apart. James leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. He thought about home, about Earth, about the noisy cities he had left behind, about the people who never really cared when he left. No one was waiting for him back there. He was just another face in the crowd. But here, in this lonely outpost, someone did need him. Not for his skills, not for his strength, but for something deeper, something raw. Karena needed him. And the thought of letting her burn alive from the inside made his stomach twist. The next morning, James found her in the storage bay. She was sitting on the floor, her back against the wall, her knees pulled close. She looked smaller somehow, even though she was taller than him. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the dim light and sweat traced lines along her face. Her golden eyes lifted when she heard him, but they weren't sharp this time. They were tired. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. James knelt down a few feet away, keeping his distance, but not leaving. "I can't just sit in my room while you're—" He stopped himself, then said it plain. "While you're dying." Karena gave a weak, broken laugh. "You think too kindly of me. I warned you, James, if you stay near, I will not be able to hold back." "Then don't hold back," he said quietly. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "You don't understand what you're offering." "Then explain it." His voice shook, but he didn't look away. "Because right now all I see is my friend falling apart, and I can't sit by and watch you suffer when I can help." Karena stared at him for a long time. Her lips trembled like she wanted to argue, but no words came. Her chest rose and fell, heavy with the fire inside her. Finally, she whispered, "If you do this, James, you will no longer just be my roommate. You will be bound to me, in ways you cannot imagine. My kind does not take lightly." Her voice cracked. "You will not be able to go back to who you were." James's throat was dry, his hands shaking. He understood the risk, at least enough to know this choice would change everything. He could run, hide in a locked room until the storm passed. He could survive untouched. But when he looked at her, really looked, he didn't see a monster. He didn't see danger. He saw Karena. James never liked silence. Back on Earth, silence usually meant something was wrong. Power was out, someone was angry, or danger was close. But here, on Outpost 9, silence wasn't rare. It was constant. The outpost sat on a lonely rock at the edge of alien territory, far from Earth, far from anyone. It wasn't glamorous like the big colonies. No green gardens, no bright city lights. Just metal walls, long corridors, humming machines, and the endless dark of space pressing against the windows. James sometimes wondered why he even agreed to come here. Maybe it was the promise of credits. Maybe it was the dream of adventure. Or maybe it was because he had nothing back on Earth worth holding on to. He wasn't truly alone, though. The outpost had two residents, James and his alien roommate. Her name was Karena. James remembered the first time he met her. She had stepped into the outpost's docking bay, tall and elegant, her skin shimmering faintly like liquid silver under the station lights. Her eyes had startled him the most, golden, bright, and sharp, like molten metal that could see right through him. At first, James had been nervous. She wasn't human. She wasn't even from a species Earth knew much about. But Karena was calm, gentle, and surprisingly normal. She ate meals in the mess hall, complained about broken equipment, and even laughed at his stupid jokes. In time, they became something like friends. Roommates who shared the same empty halls, two souls in the void, clinging to routine. Still, James never truly forgot what she was. Alien. Different. A mystery wrapped in a calm smile. And that mystery grew darker the night the storm came. It started with a low vibration that shook the floor. At first, James thought it was just another system malfunction. The outpost was old, after all. But then the alarms went off, sharp, echoing, cold. Red lights flashed along the corridor walls. James ran to the control room. Karenna was already there, her golden eyes fixed on the screens. Outside, beyond the thick glass of the observation deck, the stars flickered strangely, like someone was tearing holes in the sky. "What's happening?" James asked, breathless. "Solar storm," Karenna said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were tight on the console. "Worse than I expected." He watched the monitors. Waves of radiation rolled across space, crashing against the outpost like an invisible ocean. The storm was cutting off every signal, every connection. One by one, their comms channels blinked out. Earth, the colonies, nearby stations. Silence filled the speakers. "We're locked in," Karenna said after a moment. "The outpost. We'll seal all doors until it passes, for safety." James swallowed. "How long?" 3 days, maybe 4. 3 or 4 days. Trapped. No contact, no rescue. Just him and Karenna in a fragile shell floating in the dark. At first, James tried to be calm. He had been through storms before, though never this strong. Outposts were built to endure. The walls would hold. The shields would bend but not break. But it wasn't the storm outside that made his heart uneasy. It was the storm he didn't yet understand. The one quietly stirring in the golden eyes of his roommate. Karenna avoided his gaze as she worked on stabilizing the systems. Her hands trembled, just slightly, as she pressed the keys. Her breath was unsteady, and her silver skin shimmered brighter than usual, as though something beneath it was glowing hotter and hotter. James frowned. "You okay?" "I am managing," she said softly. But her voice was different, tight, controlled, like she was holding back something she didn't want him to see. The storm outside raged louder, battering the outpost with invisible fists. Inside, another storm, silent, hidden, was starting to grow. And James, trapped in the cold metal station with only her, could feel it. Something was wrong with Karenna, very wrong. And the next 3 days would change everything. The first night of the storm passed slowly. James sat in his bunk, listening to the outpost groan as waves of radiation pressed against its metal skin. The red emergency lights flickered, every few minutes painting the walls in a dull glow. He tried to sleep, tried to pretend it was just another mission. But something kept him awake. A feeling. A weight in the air that didn't belong. It wasn't just the storm. It was Karenna. When he saw her again in the morning, she looked different, not in a way most people would notice at first glance, but James had spent months with her. He noticed. Her silver skin, normally smooth and faintly glowing, now shimmered brighter, as if light was trapped beneath it. Her eyes, those golden eyes, seemed sharper, wilder. They followed him for a second too long, and when he met her gaze, she quickly turned away. "Did you sleep?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Karenna paused before answering. "No. My body doesn't allow it. Right now." James frowned. "Because of the storm?" She hesitated, then gave a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes. The storm." But James didn't believe her. As the hours dragged on, he noticed more changes. Karenna's breathing was heavier, even when she wasn't moving. Her hands trembled when she worked on the console, and when she thought he wasn't looking, she pressed her palm to her chest like she was trying to calm something inside. James felt torn. He wanted to ask, but he didn't want to push. Karenna wasn't just his roommate, she was his friend, and if she wanted to talk, she would. But by the second night, he couldn't ignore it anymore. They were in the mess hall, eating a tasteless dinner of protein packs and reheated noodles. The storm outside howled like an endless beast, but inside, the silence between them was louder. James watched her carefully. She didn't eat. She just stared at her food, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Finally, he broke the silence. "Something's wrong with you." Karena's head lifted sharply. For a moment, her expression was fierce, almost defensive. Then it softened into something else. Fear. "I didn't want you to see," she whispered. "See what?" James leaned forward, his voice low. "Karena, I'm not blind. You're different. Your skin, your eyes, the way you're breathing. Tell me what's happening." She looked away, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. The silence stretched until James thought she wouldn't answer. But then her voice came, quiet and trembling. "It's my species. Our cycle." James blinked. "Cycle?" She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with both shame and pain. "Mating season." James froze. His heart kicked in his chest and he wasn't sure what to say. He had joked once, long ago, about alien biology. But now, hearing it in this silent, locked station, the words felt heavy. Karena finally met his gaze. Her golden eyes shimmered with something raw, something she couldn't hide anymore. "You don't understand," she said softly. "It's not like humans. My body doesn't wait for choice. When the cycle begins, it consumes us. Hunger, heat, pain. It tears at us until we obey it." James swallowed hard. "And if you don't?" Her hands trembled harder. "Then it burns me alive from the inside, slowly, until I can't fight anymore, until I break." The mess hall suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. The storm outside roared, but all James could hear was the quiet, desperate truth in her voice. She leaned back, covering her face with her hands. "I warned the commanders before they sent me here. I told them my cycle was coming, but they didn't care. They thought the storm wouldn't trap us. They thought it wasn't their problem." James stared at her, his stomach twisted. Trapped. With her. During this. And now Karena wasn't just his alien roommate. She was something else entirely. Something dangerous, something desperate, something broken open by her own nature. He finally whispered, "What do we do?" Her hands dropped, and when she looked at him again, her golden eyes glowed brighter than ever. "That," she said, voice trembling, "is the question neither of us is ready to answer." And with that, James realized the storm outside wasn't the real danger. The storm was sitting across from him with golden eyes and silver skin, his roommate, his friend, and maybe his undoing. The second night was worse. James stayed in his bunk, lying awake, staring at the dull metal ceiling above him. The storm outside still howled, rattling the walls, making the outpost creak like an old ship at sea. But the noise wasn't what kept him awake. It was Karena. He could hear her pacing the corridor, slow steps, back and forth, like an animal, locked in a cage. Every so often there was a sound he couldn't explain, her hand brushing against the wall, her breathing quick and heavy, sometimes even a low hum that sounded almost like a growl. James turned on his side, gripping his thin blanket tighter. His chest felt heavy. He wasn't afraid of her. Not exactly. Karena had never hurt him, never even raised her voice at him. But now, she was different. And he didn't know if she could control it. Morning. His nerves were frayed. He walked to the mess hall, rubbing the tiredness from his eyes. Karena was already there, sitting at the table with her head in her hands. She looked exhausted. Her silver skin glowed faintly, brighter than before, and her golden eyes burned like fire when she finally lifted her gaze to him. James froze at the doorway. For a second, it felt like those eyes pinned him to the spot. There was something raw in them, something hungry, something desperate. But then she looked away quickly, clenching her fists against the table. "I should stay away from you," she whispered. James frowned, walking slowly to sit across from her. "Karena, no." Her voice was sharp, too sharp, and it cut him off. She closed her eyes, breathing deep, trying to calm herself. When she spoke again, her tone was softer, almost broken. James, it is dangerous for you to be near me now.